So you want to turbo your GT86 or BRZ? Let's talk about it. After watching this video, you will have gained some super valuable knowledge without having to spend hours upon hours in forums getting lost in that maze of information. Today we're going to be talking to one of the pioneers in grassroots GT86 drifting, Christian Pratt. Without any prior experience, Christian turboed his BRZ using the HKS GT3 RS Turbo kit, and will be telling you how you can do the same thing to your own car. As for myself, I know absolutely nothing about turboing a car, so I'm going to be putting myself in your shoes and make it feel like you're at an event somewhere talking to one of the more experienced guys about how to turbo your car. We'll be talking about risks, things to avoid, and other little tips you'll only be able to learn from someone who actually did it themselves. So without further ado, let's give Christian a call. All right, guys, we got Christian back here again with us. If you don't know already, he was on a previous episode breaking down everything you need to know about setting up your GT86 for drifting. That's angle mods and stuff like that. But this time, as you know, we're going to be talking about turbos. So
yeah, dude, awesome.
All right, Christian, so let's get right into it and start out with my first question, which is basically going to be, all right, so when you first decide, okay, I'm going to turbo my GT86, I'm going to turbo my BRZ, you ended up going with the HKS GT3 RS kit. So what made you go with that kit?
It is HKS. They're high quality stuff, made in Japan. So it's just a brand that I would trust. And when it comes to something like turboing or supercharging your car, you want to get something that you can stand behind. So
me going into this without any prior experience, and if I had to choose something right now, I'd probably just choose HKS as well. So Christian, how many miles did you have on your car before you turboed it? And would you have turboed an FA20 that is closer to 100K miles? Because I don't think you were quite at 100K miles, but
yeah, so I think it was probably about like 83,000 miles.
Okay, so not high up there, but not
too far off. Yeah, not all the way at 100,000. Would I do it at 100,000 miles? Probably. Okay. And actually, the reason is
if the car, I guess, it was taken care of, and you kind of know the history of it.
Well, yes, but not even that. So it's just something that I learned after getting the car turboed and just little bits of information that I'm picking up. But it's like if it's broken in a little bit more, turbos love a motor that's already been broken in a little bit more. Yeah. So, I mean, putting a turbo on a brand new motor is going to probably hurt it more than it would if you put a turbo on a 100,000 mile motor.
Basically, what you're saying is if your motor's been running good and you're hitting 100,000 miles, you've been taking care of it, and doesn't seem to be any issues. Obviously, not 100% of the time. Sometimes it's going to blow up, but that might be just fine, even if it's at 100,000.
100,000 miles, put a turbo on it, have fun with it. Just be smart, double check everything that you're doing, get a good tune, and learn how to drive a turbo car. I will say it's not the same as driving a stock car. You can't just put your foot to the floor.
All right, so you got the HKS kit. It came in the mail. Did you have to do anything else when you bought this kit? Were there any other like supporting mods you had to buy? What else did you have to buy to accompany this kit?
Yeah, that's a good question. So you definitely can't do the turbo all by itself. You need supporting mods like a oil cooler for one, because the motor is going to be just running super hot in general. Plus turbo is going to be way hotter.
So did the oil cooler come in the kit, or was it something else?
It came separate. HKS makes their own oil cooler kit that is meant to work, in tandem with all of their kits that they have for the motors. But you can really go with any oil cooler kit. But yeah, again, it is a separate purchase that you're going to have to look into. So anywhere from about $500 to $1,000 depending on what you go with.
Okay, so you got the kit and then you got an oil cooler. Was there anything else you needed to buy for this turbo kit?
Depending on how much power you actually want to make, fuel mods are going to be pretty important. So you're going to want to look at things like possibly injectors. I didn't end up doing injectors just because we weren't trying to reach those power levels. And then you're also going to want to look into doing a fuel pump as well. Both things, the OEM ones, depending on, again, how much power you're trying to put out, it's not going to be enough. So it's just little things you want to increase. All right,
so you mentioned not needing injectors because you didn't want to reach a certain power level. You're not interested in going like max boost or whatever. So with this HKS kit, what do you mean by that? Is whenever I look at like a turbo kit online, it's like, okay, it reaches this peak horsepower. So you're saying you can push it further than what it's saying on the website? What is that? And how did you choose what level you wanted to run your turbo kit at?
Gotcha. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a combination of the actual tune itself, and then you can adjust things like your wastegate. So with the HKS kit specifically, I think out of the box, it's rated for about 13 pounds of boost, and that's what the actuator for the wastegate is set at. You can actually increase that by adding more preload to the actuator, and so you can add a boost controller and bump that all the way up to, however high you dare do. I don't know.
So what you're saying is, so the kit's rated for a certain amount, but you can push it past what it says. If you want to go into that kind of territory, you're going to need all sorts of other supporting mods and stuff like that.
100%. Yeah, you need things like a boost controller. You can't actually raise the boost without a boost controller. So basically, you can go up to about 13 pounds of boost on the stock HKS kit, and then boost controller past that would let you pump it up to whatever you are crazy enough to do.
And you
So,
weren't interested in doing anything like that because you're basically you just wanted a little bit more power than stock for drifting, right? It's not some kind of crazy straight line build that you're doing. It's literally just for drifting. So you want something reliable, out of the box.
yeah, 100%. So out of the box, that will probably add about close to, I would say, 100 horsepower, depending on how you tune it. But just that, 300 horsepower in this car is more than enough. It feels like a rocket ship already. So
Okay.
it's super fun sideways now.
So as someone who's never installed a turbo on a car, talk me through the process, the installation process of a turbo kit on FA20. You don't have to go down like as far as like every single little bolt and stuff, but like what's the gist of it? What is stuff you have to do to prepare your car for installing a turbo? I assume you have to obviously take off the front bumper, but yeah, like take it away from there.
Yeah, so I think we started with taking off the front bumper. That was definitely the move right there.
There you go.
No, we threw it up on a lift. I mean, if you have access to a lift, put it on a lift. It makes it so much easier to work
Okay,
under the
but can
car.
somebody do this kind of thing without a lift?
You can do it
Do you
on jack
think you
stands.
could
It
have
would
done it
suck.
yourself without a lift? That's the question.
Yeah, I mean, it would have sucked, but you can do it on jack stands. It's
Okay.
not something that the
Okay.
car has to be on a lift for. It's just way more convenient for sure.
Okay.
Anything on a lift is more convenient. But yeah, no, so we started with taking off the front bumper. I guess right after that came the crash bar. So pretty much everything in the front end started to come off. We took off the radiator support on the top, fog lights, all that kind of stuff, all the electrical stuff pretty much all came off the car, took the headers off. Yeah, I think that was pretty much about everything that we took off before like we really dug into it. Right after that, we dropped the oil pan, drained all the oil. Amidst all that, I was also busy swapping out the fuel pump in the fuel basket, which is in the fuel tank in the back seat of the car.
So you have to swap out the fuel pump because obviously it's not, I guess, pumping enough fuel for the kit.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So you're making more boost, you're making more air go into the car, so you need more fuel. So you need a bigger pump to pump the fuel.
Okay.
So yeah, threw that into the car. That probably takes maybe about an hour or so. Not a hard process. It's just kind of messy, depending, because you can get gas and E85, whatever you run, all over yourself if you're not careful.
Yeah.
After the oil pan is off, you do have to modify the car a little bit. So you need to do things like drill a hole into the oil pan, and then from there you weld on a return pipe for the oil to go into from the turbo.
And as someone who's never had experience with this kind of stuff, was it kind of intimidating to just drill a hole in the oil pan, or what was the most intimidating part of this entire process, honestly?
Yeah, no, I mean, I would say the welding the oil pan was probably the most intimidating, because that's one of the things where if you fuck it up, then it's like, well, now you got to go buy a new oil pan.
You said welding the oil pan. So this is when you had to actually, when you drill a hole in the oil pan, you have to weld a fitting to it, correct?
Correct. Yeah. So it comes with a little inlet pipe. The kit comes with a little inlet pipe, and you weld that onto the oil pan. But yeah, definitely the sketchiest part was drilling into the oil pan and welding that on there, because again, it's one of those things where you got to buy a new oil pan, start over again potentially.
And the good thing about this process is this is probably part of the process that you could probably take to a shop or something. Like if you want to do the entire kit yourself, this is probably the one thing you could just take to someone who actually knows how to weld and do instead of trying to do it yourself, right?
Yeah, if you don't have anything like cutting tools like a angle grinder or flat wheel to cut with, and welding tools like that, then you might want to take a few of these heavy ticket items to a shop to have them knock out for you. But it shouldn't be something that would cost more than maybe $100 or something for a shop to do real fast. Yeah, so we knocked out welding the oil pan up. Crash bar needs to be cut out to fit the intercooler, and then you also have to cut some of the radiator support to be able to fit the charge pipes as well. But yeah, so modified a few things on the car like that just to make everything fit, and then it was just a matter of actually bolting everything up to the car. If you could follow instructions, I feel like anybody really can install the kit. It's just a time-consuming process. I think we reinstalled my oil pan like 5 times because I wasn't satisfied with how the RTV was laid out on it. If you can get the oil pan welded up and get all your stuff cut out the way that it needs to be, everything else is pretty straightforward in the install.
All right, so you get the turbo kit back on, you get your front bumper back on, everything's ready to go. What do you do now? So do you have to, can you turn the car on? Like I'm coming from a completely ignorant point of view. I don't even know what you do in this process. So do you turn the car on? Is it okay to turn the car on? Do you need to load the tune first? Like, how does this work? And talk to me about the tune a little bit that you chose. Is this a tune that came like with the kit, or like do you have to like have someone do it? Do you have to run dyno tests? Like, talk to me through this whole process from the second you are done installing the kit.
So actually, to be honest, it's something that you're going to have to do right prior to installing the kit. You need to get with a tuner. You need to get somebody that's going to be able to provide you with a base tune for the turbo, because as soon as you throw a turbo on the car, it's going to be getting air from a place that it doesn't expect. And so it's just going to throw everything off. So yeah, we got with the tuner that I ended up going with. His name is Steve Wiseman, a great tuner. This guy lives in Australia. He's able to remotely tune, and he works with the Open Flash tablet, which I think I mentioned in the last video that we did. The only other thing that I forgot to mention that you would also need is the 3-bar map sensor, which will actually allow the ECU to read wider ranges of boost like that. I forget what the brand is, but like literally if you Google 3-bar map sensor, it's fairly inexpensive part and widely used. So
do you think that's something that should have been included in the kit, or?
Not necessarily, because some people will get different ones. Some people would prefer to get a 4-bar. It really just depends on. So the bars would be like 1 bar, I forget, is like 15 psi or something like that. So 3-bar would be like 45 psi or somewhere around there. So you would get, however much, depending on however much boost you plan to make on the kit. In our case, 3-bar is plenty, because there's no way we're going to push 45 pounds of boost.
Yeah.
So you would need the boost sensor, more or less, is what that would be. And then you need the tune loaded up on the car, and then you can fire it up. So
okay, so he threw a basic turbo tune on the car, you fired it up, and then I assume there were some adjustments you had to do after that.
Fired it up, super stoked that everything, fired up first try, because it's the first time really disassembling the motor like that. I took the car off the lift. We made sure there were no leaks or anything. Let it idle for a little bit, ran coolant and everything through it, got everything up to temp. Again, made sure no leaks or anything were going on. And then I finally took it for a test drive the next day. That's when we started getting into some of the tuning problems. So I went to do my first pull.
Because obviously there were some issues, right? Because it's not the exact.
Oh yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's not going to be made, specifically for the car yet until
you just needed to be able to turn the car on.
Right. Yeah. So the particular tune that we threw on the car had what's called a boost cut on it, and we had it set at 10 psi. So basically, whenever the car gets to 10 psi of boost, then it just cuts fuel and cuts ignition timing and things like that. Basically, so you don't blow the motor. So it's kind of like a fail safe. So if again, if it sees too high of a boost pressure, then it's like, nope, stop. It sucks though, because it basically feels like hitting a brick wall in midair, if that makes any kind of sense. So you're
saying it cuts fuel? Does that mean like it doesn't turn the car off, right? It just cuts fuel, and
it literally feels like you're hitting a brick wall without actually hitting a brick wall. So you're driving, and all of a sudden, like, a huge shudder because the car all of a sudden got no fuel or spark. So it doesn't feel good. It's not great. It's not terrible for the car either, but again, it's more of a fail safe to prevent it from creating way too much boost and then potentially doing other things.
And then you said the kit runs safe up to 15 psi, but you put a 10 psi just for safe measures.
The kit technically should run around 13 psi, but again, so the tuner put it at 10 psi because that's kind of what the accepted safe level for boost on this motor would be under ideal conditions.
Really? Okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so and I guess I can talk about that a little bit. So ideally, you don't want to really be pushing more than about 12-ish pounds, I would say, on a stock internal motor. If you build it, that's a whole other story that we could get into, and you could do crazy shit with it at that point. We know people that have 600 horsepower builds in the Houston area. Wild things can be done with these motors. But yeah, like I said, I just wanted enough power bump to be able to get around the track a little bit quicker, and it does just that. I can speak about Lee again. He's actually running 13 pounds of boost on 93 octane. So far he's been good. More power to him. It's no guarantee, that anything will happen to these motors, but just looking at percentages, like the kind of consensus that I've seen, I guess, is like if you're running about 12-ish psi, then you can expect like 30% of those motors will, start to maybe have rod knock or something, spin a bearing.
Every motor's different. Every motor's been through different stuff.
You never know. So like I said, you can't say 100% what any of these motors would do, but higher boost you run, if you're running more than about 350 horsepower in these cars, on stock internals, then you're, playing with fire at that point. So we try to get the car somewhere in the range of about 300 horsepower. That's what I would say my butt dyno feels like it lives at. So I'm happy with where it is. After we started tuning it, we ended up actually putting a new wastegate actuator on the car, because like I mentioned, the HKS one was rated for about 13 pounds. And even if I took all the preload off of that, we could only get it down to about 10 pounds of boost. Actually, it was probably only down to about 11 pounds. And we still felt like that wasn't low enough.
So you were trying to get it lower than, okay.
We were trying to
change the wastegate actuator because you wanted to get it lower.
Yeah.
Okay.
So swapped out wastegate actuator, swapped out the wastegate actuator with a Turbo Smart actuator that was a 7-pound one, and it usually creeps up to about 8 or 9 psi, which is a perfectly acceptable boost limit to, beat on this car at this point. And so far, I've done probably 5 track days, I think, on it already so far.
Yeah, and that's
And
drifting too.
yeah, drifting it. And so, redlining it for several seconds at a time and just really beating the crap out of it. And so
Yeah, and
far,
that's
it's
at
been good.
Speed Sports in Houston, Texas, where you get pretty much unlimited seat time all day long. Would you recommend someone to turbo their car before they start drifting, or would you say learn how to drift on stock power?
Oh yeah, basically, if your intent is to drift the car, then I would 100% wait until you actually, have progressed in your drifting career before you actually put a turbo on it. If you drive a low horsepower car, go to more power. It's going to be so much easier to drive than if you try to put a lot of power under your feet and then try to learn how to slide it. Some people might find it a little bit easier just because they can drive with the extra power, but driving with low horsepower first is going to make you a better driver.
I agree. I agree.
And also, if you were to go out and put a turbo on, let's say, a more or less stock BRZ, and then you go and try to send it and you don't have any other angle mods or anything else, you don't know what you're doing drifting wise, you're going to spin out.
One quick thing to mention too, when you do turbo this car and you want to start drifting, you're going to need angle. Because it's going to be way too snappy if you add power. It's already kind of too snappy on stock power, but it's manageable. But if you do drift this car turboed, you're going to need angle, number one. And number two, another supporting mod that we didn't mention is the steering controller, right?
Oh yeah, if you guys still haven't done a steering controller and you're already doing angle mods, then you're doing it wrong.
Have you had any issues with the car since you changed the wastegate actuator and got that tune dialed in, or not at all?
Really, since we got everything dialed in, it's been good. The only small things that we've noticed is I have a slight leak in my fuel tank, I think. And it's actually
Really?
from removing so when you go to remove the whole fuel pump basket, there's a kind of like a collar screw that you have to undo on top of the fuel tank.
Okay.
And depending on how you put it back in, it's really easy to mess up the gasket on there. And so we ended up slightly messing mine up a little bit. So if you fill it all the way up, from the pump, then you go drive away and, slide it around for a couple minutes, it'll slosh around, and then you go and park and you get a little bit spilling out underneath the car.
Oh God.
But it's fine. It's really not that bad. Yeah. It freaked me out the first time that it happened because I was like, oh my gosh, I can smell and I can touch all this E85 under the car. But after you drive the car for like 10 miles and the gas tank goes down a little bit, it doesn't leak again. And
you gonna try to take
I know
care
where
of
the fuel. Probably not. No, to be honest, we actually already did try to take care of it. I tried tightening it, but probably need to replace that gasket. But
okay. So it's the gasket thing.
Knowing where it's coming from, it's really not a hazard. If there were fuel that was leaking at the front of my car, yeah, absolutely. But it's fine.
All right, we'll see. Okay, all right.
You should do an interview with Brad and talk to him about his, because his is way worse than mine.
Brad's interview is coming up next. For those of you that don't know, our friend Brad just went on
actually caught fire.
Yeah, he just went on Drift Week. First 86 to drive Drift Week, I believe. So we're gonna have a whole interview talking to him about his experience. So yeah, I look forward to that. Yeah, no, thank you so much for talking to us today, Christian. As I said, I didn't know anything about even the process of turboing this car, and now I feel like I've learned a lot from you, and I'm sure a lot of other beginners have learned so much from you. So thank you so much for helping us out, man. It's awesome.
Yeah, dude, my pleasure. Hope everything has been somewhat informative and I don't sound like a complete idiot.
No, dude, you're good, bro. This is exactly what we need in this scene. Well, so thank you so much, bro.
Awesome. Yeah, man.